courtroom 4. Do you guys still need me on the side?
Yes, we do.
All right, I see the live stream is now up and going. So for those of you that are with us via the live stream, this is St. Augustine grass versus bluegrass. I have already sworn in the team members and the witnesses. I'll now swear in you folks. Obviously, I can't hear you. But for those of you that are with us via the live stream, this is St. Augustine grass versus bluegrass. Sunita, can you turn off your audio? I'll now swear in you folks. Obviously, I can't hear you. But for those of you that are with us via the live stream, this is St. Augustine grass versus bluegrass. Sunita, can you turn off your audio?
Yes, give me just a moment here, please. Let's see. I don't know why this does this. Yes, give me just a moment here, please. What the hell? Why? That's why. Okay, you should be ready to go now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so gallery members, including teacher and attorney coaches, family members and friends, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? I am imagining everybody giving me a resounding we will. And then scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes, I do.
All right, very good. Then I will go back. I believe it was bluegrass that had some pretrial issues you wanted to address.
And the plaintiff does as well after bluegrass.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start with bluegrass. And I think it was maybe Ms. Smith, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct, Your Honor. Our first pretrial motion be that when addressing the court, we be allowed to remove our masks.
I'm not afraid of catching anything from you today. So yes, you may remove your mask when you're addressing the court. And frankly, if you're in a room and socially distanced from people, I don't need you to be wearing them at all.
Thank you. Our second matter is that we be allowed to remain sitting while addressing yourself in the court.
Yes, that is also acceptable.
For the third, I would like to ask if this court prefers speaking objections or non-speaking objections.
Speaking objections. You mean you object and then you tell me why you're objecting? I would prefer that, and I think our scoring panelists would like that as well. So, and I think it's good practice for you guys. So absolutely, speaking objections.
And for the fourth, we would ask that anytime there are technological difficulties, the time be paused by the timekeepers.
Yes, if there are technical problems, just let me know and I'll make sure to remind our timekeepers to pause that time for us. And if it's such a problem that you need a little additional time, also let me know that and we can take a brief recess.
Our fifth matter would be making sure that everyone, yourself, the judges, and opposing counsel and witnesses have a copy of the affidavits and exhibits as is laid out in the rules for the virtual competition.
I had those. Let me see. It disappeared on me, but I do have them. There they are. I have everything. Do our scoring panelists have all the exhibits and everything? I'm getting some thumbs up. Looks like we're good. Anything else, Ms. Smith?
Just one last trifle. Would it be possible that during our presentations, when speaking of the Weirs siblings, Dakota and Skylar Weirs, that we address them by their first name for clarity?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. That is all of the pretrial motions for Bluegrass.
All right, thank you. I'll move over to St. Augustine Grass. And
Thank you, Your Honor.
go ahead when you're ready.
The defense would like to ask that the judge and jury be made aware of these stipulated facts, which are that the signatures in all of the paperwork are valid and that the chain of custody is not in dispute for evidence.
We are so advised.
On top of this, the defense, in like kind with Team Bluegrass, would like to ask that the judge, jury, witnesses, and opposing counsel be given access to their exhibit packets and be allowed to reference them when asked about certain exhibits to avoid the slowdown that screen sharing would cause.
Absolutely.
Okay, and as our final point, we would ask that any remaining time in the plaintiff's closing be reserved for rebuttal.
It shall.
Thank you, that is all.
Very good. All right, so if we are ready, I will just move to St. Augustine Grass and ask you to begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today because Lush Fertilizer was too lazy, too greedy, too negligent. Because Lush Fertilizer was too lazy, our client, Dakota Weir's life was completely, irreversibly altered for the worse. Lush was too lazy, so Dakota Weir's developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from a bonding agent in Lush's fertilizer called Drufo. Lush was too greedy, so Dakota Weir's will never have his dream realized of playing piano at Juilliard. We are here because Dakota Weir's cannot have his life back. And because Lush was too negligent, the same fate could fall upon others. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of negligence is failure to use reasonable care resulting in the damage or injury of another. We have to prove, and we will show, that Lush Fertilizer manufactured a product containing Drufo. We have to prove, and we will show, that the defendant was negligent by failing to prevent unreasonable risk to those who would reasonably use their product. We have to prove, and we will show, that Dakota Weir's is someone who would be reasonably expected to use their product. We have to prove, and we will show, that the harm that came to Dakota Weir's was because of Lush Fertilizer's negligence. Today, you will hear the testimony of Dakota Weir's, a boy whose entire future was planned around his passion, piano, and how it was torn away from him. You will hear how Dakota, in his landscaping work, was not forewarned about the dangers of using Lush Fertilizer. You will hear how, in a job where he would be reasonably expected to use such a product, the defendant tries to claim Mr. Weir's to be negligent when he was only doing his job. You will hear how Dakota Weir's could not have known the dangers of Drufo. Lush was too lazy to issue a proper warning. You will hear how Dakota Weir's, a healthy, active member of his community, developed a serious disease that we will prove could only have been caused by Lush Fertilizer. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is an environmentally developed disease. Dakota Weir's and his twin lived an almost identical life. The only difference was Drufo, and yet his twin did not develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Today, you will hear Carson Durst, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer, testify that the company knew the risks of Drufo. Not only were they aware, but extensive research was done on the matter, and a link specifically to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was found. Lush tried to cover up their findings. They knew there was a risk, they knew how to prevent it, and yet you will hear that they did not. You will hear Dr. Casey Rogers, a man with extensive background in horticulture who studies the harmful effects of prolonged use of chemicals on the body, state that Drufo is not safe. They will explain that those exposed to Drufo, like Dakota Weir's, are 10 times more likely to develop cancer, and specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But Lush was too greedy to prevent this with a straightforward warning. Lush was too lazy, too greedy, too negligent. You will hear how Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, knew that in using Drufo in their fertilizer, they were putting their users at risk. The defendant will try to tell you that Drufo does not cause cancer. The defendant will try to tell you that the risk was not supported by valid science. We will show that Drufo does cause cancer and that the science says so. You will hear Blake Doncourt's admission that they knew that baking the Drufo would remove any risk of its causing cancer, but it was too expensive and Lush was too greedy. They will try to tell you that Blake Doncourt would have been going above and beyond by baking it, but it was never a matter of going above and beyond. It was a matter of profit. They chose profit over principle because Lush was too greedy. They will also call Skylar Weirs, Dakota Weir's own twin, who has taken a stand against him because of familial prejudice. They will try to tell you that Skylar Weirs, with a gambling problem and a job writing about flat earthers and aliens, knows that Drufo does not cause cancer. We will show that it does cause cancer and that Skylar Weir's bad relationship with their brother has caused their statement to be biased. They don't care that Lush was too negligent. The defendant will call Devin Williams, whose sole job was to find dangers and prevent them in Lush's fertilizer, and how they utterly failed. You will see that in studies, Drufo was found to be no better than other fertilizers, and that they chose profit. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear how Lush was too lazy, how Lush was too greedy, how Lush was too negligent. If Lush cared, Dakota Weirs would not have lost all but his life. He would be out at Juilliard living his dream. Because Lush was too lazy, because Lush doesn't care, we are here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dakota Weirs deserves compensation for the pain he will have to live with for the rest of his life because Lush was liable. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jensen. I'll now turn to Bluegrass, and you can give your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Opposing counsel, members of the jury, we are presented today with a tragic case of misinformation in which one Dakota Weirs claims that he developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma as a result of his exposure to Lush Fertilizer Incorporated's product. No one is going to deny that this is a case of tragedy. This young man has lost a great deal as a result of his illness. This being said, it is imperative to adhere to the conclusions of science, not the urgings of sympathy. We are here today, members of the jury, to explore the facts and the science of the case. It will be made clear to you that neither of these crucial elements align with Dakota Weirs' accusation. This case is crowded with emotionally misleading evidence that the plaintiff will use to their advantage. But we will encourage you, members of the jury, do not be led astray by the tragedy of the matter at hand. Opposing counsel will attempt to convince you that Dakota Weirs' illness is a result of negligence on the part of Lush Fertilizer Incorporated and the people behind it. But this is far from the case. The defense is dedicated to providing you with unbiased facts, all of which will prove that Lush Fertilizer Incorporated was neither negligent nor irresponsible in the distribution of safety warnings associated with their product. You will see at the end of this case, members of the jury, that not only is there no proof of Lush Fertilizer being carcinogenic, but even if it was, Dakota Weirs would still be responsible for his illness as he neglected to follow the proper safety precautions provided by his employer while he was using Lush's product. To support the evidence of the defense, you will hear from Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, who is dedicated to showing the truth about Lush Fertilizer and its ingredients. You will hear from Skylar Weirs, an experienced journalist with valuable insight into the issue at hand. And finally, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, an expert in this field with direct firsthand knowledge of Drufo and its safety, who will provide you with unbiased scientific evidence that Lush Fertilizer is in no way carcinogenic. Members of the jury, science over sympathy, fact over misfortune. What has happened to Dakota Weirs is terrible, but do not allow it to cloud your judgment in this matter. At the end of the case, we will prove that Lush Fertilizer is not responsible for Dakota Weirs' illness. The product does not pose any significant health risks, and even if it did, the irresponsibility still falls onto Mr. Weirs. Do not allow misfortune to be the deciding voice in your decision today. We will implore you to side with truth, facts, and science, and find that Lush Fertilizer is not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. All right, the plaintiffs may call their first witness.
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Dakota Weirs to stand.
All right, thank you. You can proceed when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
I'm Dakota Weirs, and my last name is spelled Weirs.
Mr. Weirs, can you tell the jury why you are here today?
I'm here today because I believe that a product in Lush Fertilizer, Drufo, caused my cancer, and I want to hold them accountable.
Mr. Weirs, how has this cancer you just mentioned affected your life?
Well, I was very active in my community. I was very active in my school. I had a job in summer, and I loved to play the piano, but I cannot do this anymore.
Why can't you do those things anymore, Mr. Weirs?
Well, I'm always in pain now. And not only that, I'm always tired. I can't even sit on the piano bench because of my shortness of breath and the bruises it causes me. In fact, I am in pain right here, right now, sitting in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. Before you had developed your disease, did you have any plans for school?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. I don't see how this pertains to the matter at hand.
Response?
Your Honor, this information is relevant as it is laying foundation so that the Dakota Weirs can tell us his damages from his cancer.
Any reply?
Your Honor, Dakota Weir's plans to further his education has nothing to do with the development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or Lush Fertilizer.
Okay,
Your
thank
Honor,
you.
if I may respond.
No, I do a objection, response, and reply, and then I'm going to rule. So objection is overruled. The plaintiff does have to prove damages, so we need to know how his life has been affected. So objection's overruled. You can answer the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Weirs?
Yes, please.
Mr. Weirs, before you developed your disease, did you have plans for school?
As I was saying, yes, I did. I was going to go into the love of my life, piano, as my job at Juilliard. And not only was I going to Juilliard, they gave me a full ride scholarship there. But now, because of my shortness of breath and my pain, I can't.
Mr. Weirs, why is your piano so important to you?
Well, when I was very young, very small, me and my grandpa would spend hours at the piano together. It was a great bonding time. And when he died some years ago, playing the piano always reminded me of him. And since now I have cancer and can't do piano anymore, it felt like losing him a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. May I ask, does anyone else in your family have cancer?
No, I'm the only one, not even my twin brother.
Did your twin spend a lot of time with you?
Yes, when we were young, we basically did everything together. The only thing that he didn't really participate in was my landscaping job at Haven Landscaping.
Thank you. Mr. Weirs, why do you believe that Lush Fertilizer caused your cure?
Well, I was sitting on the couch, which is now a very common part of my day since everything else is painful. I was watching the news, and there was a news story about how a ingredients in Lush Fertilizer, Drufo, was linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which coincidentally is the cancer I have.
Had you used Lush Fertilizer before?
Oh, yes. At my landscaping job, I started in the summer when I was 14 and have been at Haven Landscaping since from then until I developed cancer.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. Your Honor, I would now like to direct the court and opposing counsel's attention to what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 1. Mr. Weirs, I ask that you do the same. Mr. Weirs, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain to the jury what it is?
This is the ingredients label on the Lush fertilizer product that I use.
Thank you. Is it a fair and accurate representation of that label?
Yes, I believe it is.
Your Honor, I move to enter what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Exhibit 1 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, does this label show that there is Drufo in Lush Fertilizer's ingredients?
Yes, it does.
Are there any recommendations for user safety on the fertilizer label?
Yes, there are.
What are some of those warnings?
Well, it says here that that the user should utilize protective clothing and wear a respirator or N95 face mask.
Thank you. One final question, Mr. Weirs. Was there a warning on Lush Fertilizer's packaging about Drufo causing cancer?
Well, other than to keep it out of the reach of children and your eyes, no, there was nothing that could be linked to cancer.
Thank you, Mr. Weirs. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weirs, it is your belief that your exposure to Drufo, an ingredient in Lush fertilizer, caused you to develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And you came to this conclusion because of a story you saw on television, yes?
Well, that's when I first suspected it.
Yes, and then that idea was strengthened by research you did through Google?
Yes, research that me and my father did together.
And Mr. Weirs, because of your very unfortunate illness, you were unable to pursue an education past high school, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you have any scientific or medical education?
No.
Objection relevance.
Response?
Your Honor, this is relevant because it speaks to the experience of Mr. Weirs. If he has no scientific or medical education, his credibility on the diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma or his belief that it is caused by Lush fertilizer becomes much less reliable.
Reply?
Your Honor, Mr. Weirs does not need to be a scientist. He himself has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and his being a scientist and knowing the science behind it does not necessarily change anything about whether Lush fertilizer is negligent or whether his cancer is caused by Drufo.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. The witness may answer that question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Weirs?
Yes, please.
Alrighty. Do you have any scientific or medical education?
No, sir.
And can you provide any proof based on your own education and experience that Drufo is carcinogenic?
No.
Now, you were advised to use proper protection while using Lush fertilizer, is that correct?
Yes, I was advised, but it was never enforced.
Thank you. And you did not follow this recommendation, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, could I direct your attention to Exhibit 1 that is now in evidence? Would you mind reading what it says under hazards? No need to read caution or anything like that, just the sentence underneath.
Keep out of reach of children.
Thank you. And Mr. Weirs, how old were you when you used Lush fertilizer?
Sir, I was 14.
So you used Lush fertilizer as a minor, even though it says on the packaging that you should not.
I may have been a minor, sir, but I was in my teens.
To be fair, Mr. Weirs, if you are a minor, you count as a child under the law. So you did use it as a minor?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Any redirect, Ms. Jensen?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Mr. Weirs, do you know anybody else who has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No.
And were you the only one at your landscaping job who didn't wear protective gear?
No, I was not the only one. Everyone else at my job did not.
Did the others at your job use Lush fertilizer?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Any recross based on that redirect?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. The plaintiffs may call their next witness.
Your Honor, we would like to call Carson Durst to the stand.
Very well. And Mr. Durst or Ms. Durst, I can't remember. You have already been sworn in. So counsel, you can proceed with questioning when you are ready.
Thank you. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
My name is Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
And what do you do for a living?
I am the head of research and development at Terra's Greenery.
When did you start doing this?
I started my career in the fertilizer industry back in 2003, giving me roughly 20 years of experience.
And who were you working for?
I started working for Lush Fertilizer.
And where do you work now?
Currently, I work for Terra's Greenery.
And do you have any certifications?
Yes, I do. I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Arizona State University.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. How did you get your job at Lush Fertilizer?
Well, like many young people start their careers, I was offered an internship by a close friend, Blake Doncourt, who is the CEO of Lush.
And how did you know Mr. Doncourt?
His son, Charles Doncourt, and I played on the local soccer team together, and we were virtually inseparable.
And when did you start with Lush Fertilizer?
I started in July 2003, right after college.
How was your early experience at Lush?
It went very well. I rose up the ranks pretty quickly and went from intern to a full-time position in merely months.
What did you do in your full-time position?
I was a product development engineer on the research and development team.
And what were you developing at the time?
We worked on developing Drufo.
And what is Drufo?
Drufo is a chemical bonding agent in many of Lush Fertilizer's fertilizer products, and it essentially helps preserve the product.
Objection, Your Honor. Outside of the witness's scope.
A
Your
response?
Honor, this is not outside of the witness's scope because he worked on this product. He developed this product and would know the use of it.
Any reply?
Your Honor, this calls for expert experience that Mr. Durst does not have.
Has this witness been offered as an expert?
No, Your Honor, because in the rules of mock trial, it's not allowed.
Then I will overrule the objection and you can continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. What did the Drufo development process involve, Mr. Durst?
Our team was specifically tasked with researching a certain compound in Drufo named nitrogen phosphorus carbonate, and we essentially tested the possible safety risks it could contain and noting them in our lab notebooks.
Thank you. And what did these studies find?
I specifically located a study conducted in Britain that indicated that this compound is carcinogenic in rats.
And Mr. Durst, why weren't there studies on humans?
Well, it is very unethical to conduct studies of possible carcinogens on humans because you don't want to just give people cancer.
Thank you. When did Lush begin its second study of Drufo?
Our second study began after concerns arose that Drufo could be linked to cancer.
Thank you. I would like to draw the court's attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4 for identification purposes. Your Honor, I would ask the court to direct the opposing counsel's attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4 for identification purposes as well. Have you seen this before, Mr. Durst?
Yes, I have.
Could you explain to the jury what it is?
This is an email from my manager at Lush Fertilizer indicating the procedures we should take on the second study on Drufo's possible carcinogenic effects on humans.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the email you received, Mr. Durst?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 4 is admitted as evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. What was the conclusion of this second study?
Well, in the final meeting for this study, our team displayed concerns that Drufo could be not only linked to cancer, but specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And management told us to keep it under wraps until further
Objection, Your Honor.
analysis.
Hearsay.
I believe the objection was to hearsay. Any response?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay because the discussion was between agents of Lush Fertilizer and falls under statement of a party opponent.
Reply?
Your Honor, this is an out-of-court statement using to prove the truth of the matter.
So in a situation like this, it is a party opponent statement. I'm going to sustain the objection because the witness hasn't said who told him. I'm not going to sustain or allow evidence in when I don't know who specifically made the statement. So he just said his management. It's not attributed to a specific person. So I'm going to sustain the objection as hearsay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Was there any recommendations made that would eliminate the risk of Drufos causing cancer?
Yes, it was recommended that Lush bake Drufo-containing products to reduce or possibly eliminate any possible carcinogenic effects.
Was the fertilizer baked?
No, Lush did not pull through on that.
Did Lush know the dangers of Drufo?
Yes, they were aware.
Thank you. How did your work life change after these studies were concluded?
Well, after these studies concluded, my manager, Gary Langley, started giving me poor performance reports, although I can assure you that I did do the same quality of work, if not even better. It was almost as if Gary had something against me, possibly for revealing Druffo's
Objection, Your Honor.
possible cocaine.
Speculation.
Hold on, I think I heard an objection. Counsel, can you repeat that?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Response?
Your Honor, this is not speculation because it was Mr. Durst's personal experience.
Reply.
Mr. Durst is speculating to Mr. Langley's response.
I agree. He's speculating as to what Mr. Langley's motivations were, so I'll sustain the objection.
All right, thank you. How did your association with Lush end, Mr. Durst?
Well, after these performance reports just kept coming, I started seeking employment elsewhere because I knew that it was just going to culminate in me getting fired. By the time I was fired from Lush, I had encountered a position in Terra's Greenery, another fertilizer company.
How did Mr. Doncourt react?
Like Doncourt reacted by filing a lawsuit against me, claiming that I broke non-compete agreement, that I could not go work for Terra's Greenery.
What was the result of this legal battle?
The court ended up settling in my favor and claiming that I could go work for Terra's Greenery after a 6 months waiting period.
Thank you. How is work at Terra's Greenery?
Work at Terrace has gone very good. I have rose up the ranks, and I am now in charge of my whole department as head of research and development.
And Mr. Durst, Lush Fertilizer knew the dangers of Druffo.
Yes, they
Objection,
did.
speculation.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Hold on 1 second. I think I heard an objection to the last question, so I'll let counsel go ahead and flesh that out.
Yes, Your Honor. I said objection to speculation.
Your
And-
Honor,
Hold on 1 second. Counsel, remind
Sorry.
me what question you're objecting to.
The last one stated.
I understand that. Just what was the question?
Can you please restate the question?
yes, I can. Did Lush Fertilizer know Druffo wasn't safe?
All right, so that's the question that drew the objection as to speculation. What's your response, Ms. Jensen?
Your Honor, it's not speculation because Carson Durst studied it and was on the development team and found it to be unsafe. He was working for Lush, so Lush knew it was unsafe.
Any reply?
No reply, Your Honor.
I think Ms. Jensen's reasoning is sound. I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
So, Mr. Durst, while you were employed with Lush, you were tasked with researching the safety of Druffo, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And that assignment came from Lush itself?
Yes, specifically my manager.
Meaning nobody was making Lush undertake that research. The company made that decision on its own.
Yeah, but every company has to.
Objection relevance?
Reply.
It is relevant to know. 1 second, Your Honor. Let me address cocaine. Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
I'm prepared. So this is looking for comparative regulation, and Lush was not looking for that.
Counsel, repeat your question for me.
I was sorry. You're sorry, Your Honor. they were looking for comparative negligence, and Lush was not.
Okay. Any response or reply to the response, Ms. Jensen?
Yes. This is not relevant because we are here to talk about Dakota Weir's damages, and who made the decision is not relevant to that.
I'm going to overrule the objection and let Mr. LaRue explore that issue. So go ahead, Mr. LaRue.
Thank you, Your Honor. So my next question would be, in fact, Lush Fertilizer employed a whole team of people to research the product to make sure it was not only safe for the environment, but for the public. Correct, Mr. Durst?
Yes.
But you claim that some of the data was left out of the final project, but you never saw the data, right?
Well, we received a conclusional report, and none of this data was included in that report.
Nobody at Lush ever told you to hide your research?
No.
Or to change the outcome, correct? A yes or no is will suffice. Would you like me to continue?
Yeah.
Your Honor, permission to direct the witness as well as the jury and opposing counsel to what has previously been marked as exhibit number 3.
Yes, you have permission to do so.
Mr. Durst, once you're ready.
I'm ready.
Excellent. Do you recognize this exhibit, Mr. Durst?
Yes, I do.
What is it, Mr. Durst?
It's the study I found on this chemical compound that is contained in Drufo being carcinogenic in rats.
Correct. So you were able to determine that Drufo is carcinogenic in rats.
Yes.
But you were unable to determine that Drufo was carcinogenic in humans.
Yes, because we cannot perform studies on health hazards in humans.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. Now, if we may move to the fact that you were good friends with the Donnercourt family.
Yes, I was.
So if they were concerned with the outcomes of the research, it would be pretty safe to say that Blake Doncourt would have mentioned it to you, correct?
Not really, because our life work and family and personal life were not very included.
Not even as good family friends, you would have been informed or have informed Blake of any difficulties?
No, I don't think so.
Not even to the fact that you were such good friends, Blake helped you get a job at Lush.
No.
Had it not been for Blake, you likely would have missed on that kind of job simply because of ability, correct?
Yes, because firms like this are not likely to hire people with no experience.
However, you don't work at Lush anymore, do you, Mr. Durst?
No, I do not.
Is that because you were fired after mounting complaints of your job performance?
Yes, I was.
However, you were also under the scrutiny of the executive team at Lush Fertilizer, who was confronting mounting complaints, which probably led to your probationary status with the company, correct?
Yes, specifically Katie Langley.
And Blake agreed with the actions of your superiors?
Well, Blake wasn't very involved in this.
Okay. So even when you had a close relationship that allowed you to progress in your career?
What do you mean by that?
Objection, big question, Your Honor.
Mr. LaRue, if you'll just rephrase the question, please.
Yes. So even when you had a close relationship, as we have proven with Mr. Doncourt, that allowed you to progress in your career, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when were you hired at Terrace?
I was hired at Terrace in 2006.
Okay.
Late 2008.
Late 2008. And you had an argument with Blake, correct?
Yes.
So you were fired for poor performance. You never alerted anybody that you were going to go to Terrace, correct?
No, I did not.
Mr. Durst, do you know what a non-compete agreement is?
Yes, I do.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevant.
Response?
The non-compete agreement is extremely relevant because it stated that if he goes to a different company, he could not share secrets. And this is particular with Terra's Greenery being a close competitor with Lush.
Reply?
Your Honor, this isn't relevant because we're here to talk about Dakota Weir's damages yet again. And as this has already been resolved, I don't see how this could have any sway in this case.
I will overrule the objection, and counsel, you can continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. You signed a non-compete agreement when you first started working at Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to direct Mr. Durst to Exhibit 5.
Yes, you may do so.
Mr. Durst, please alert me once you get to Exhibit 5.
I got it.
Okay, Mr. Durst, is this an accurate copy of the non-compete agreement you signed?
Yeah.
Has it been altered in any way?
Nope.
Your Honor, permission to enter this exhibit into evidence.
Any objection from the plaintiff?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, exhibit, I believe that was 5, is accepted into evidence.
Mr. Durst, and thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, can you please read Section 2 of the non-compete agreement?
Non-disclosure convenient. The employee will not at any time or in any manner, either directly or indirectly, divulge, disclose, reveal, or communicate any trade secret belonging to Lush or any third party, including but not limited to any competitor of Lush.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence.
Response?
This is a perjury in a court of law if he does not recognize this as what he signed to.
Any reply?
Your Honor, he did recognize it, but opposing counsel is trying to imply that he has disclosed information about Lush to Terrace Greenery, which is nowhere stated that he has.
All right, fair enough. I think that the exhibit and this testimony does potentially go toward the witness's credibility, so I will overrule the objection.
Mr. Durst, after being removed, you felt the best course of action was to truly gain employment at Terrace Greenery, correct?
Yes, as that was a position available in the same field.
And that was about the same time that you were having difficulty with Blake, correct?
Yes.
You realized you were getting hired to a close competitor of Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes.
And your salary is greater than at Lush's.
Well, yes, because I am at a higher rank now.
Understood, Mr. Durst. And Terra is releasing a similar product to Lush's patented product. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue. Any redirect, Ms. Jensen?
Briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, why did you go to work at Terrace Greenery?
Because I had realized my career with Lush would be over soon, and I couldn't just stay jobless.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Mr. LaRue, did you have any brief recross based on that redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Durst, you may step down and the plaintiffs may call their next witness.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. You may begin your questioning when you're ready.
Thank you. Apologies. Having a technical moment. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Casey Rogers, Rogers.
Can you explain to the jury what you do for a living?
Yes, I am a professor at the University of California at Berkeley in the Horticulture and Entomology Department.
Professor, what are your academic credentials?
I have a PhD in agriculture and toxicology from the University of California at Berkeley, and a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Entomology, and Chemistry, excuse me, from CSU.
Do you have any other relevant previous experience?
Yes, I do. I was a research analyst for a large multinational company.
Your Honor, I would now like to draw the court's attention to what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 6. Inform me when you are there, Professor.
I'm there.
Have you seen this before?
Yes, I have.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of what you have examined?
Yes.
Would you describe it for the jury, please?
Yes, it is my curriculum vitae, or my CV, which entails my relevant employment and education experience.
What does this experience include?
It shows that I have primarily studied pesticide chemistry and toxicology.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 6?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 6 is admitted.
Thank you. And I would now like to draw the court's attention to what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 7. Have you seen this, Professor?
Yes,
Is it a fair and accurate representation of what you've looked at?
yes, it is.
What is it?
It is a list of my related peer-reviewed research publications.
What did the research for these publications involve?
It shows I have studied various different chemicals, specifically Drufo.
Thank you. How long have you been studying Drufo?
Since 2013.
What studies exactly have you conducted?
Let's see, I conducted a study to its weed resistance in both 2013 and 2019, and 2 other studies on human exposure to Drufo, along with its carcinogenicity.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 7 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 7?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 7 is admitted.
How have you used your aforementioned research?
I have consulted many advisory boards and regulatory agencies on how to avoid such harmful effects for workers.
Your Honor, I now move to have this witness recognized as an expert in pesticide toxicology, specifically involving Drufo and its harmful effects in carcinogenicity.
Any objection from the defense?
Your Honor, permission to voir dire the witness.
You may.
Dr. Rogers, you're employed as a professor of horticulture.
Yes, I am.
And horticulture is the practice of garden cultivation and management.
Yes.
You're also a professor of entomology.
Yes.
And entomology is the study of insects, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And your degree lies in agriculture and chemistry.
Yes.
Agriculture, of course, being the cultivation of plants, yes? And you're not a medical doctor, are you?
I am not.
So your expertise really lies in plants and insects.
Yes, it does.
and you researched the effects of Drufo yourself independently.
Yes.
Your Honor, I move that if Dr. Rogers is entered as an expert, that her expertise be limited solely to the negative and harmful effects of pesticides and fertilizers on plants and insects, as opposed to any effect they may have on the human body, as her expertise and education is almost entirely in those fields, and she has no medical expertise with which to speak of the human.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. Any response from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers may have studied agriculture specifically, but that does mean that she understands how pesticides work and the toxicology of pesticides as listed in her research interests in this exhibit. So I believe pesticide toxicology and Drufo and its harmful effects, especially given that she has done multiple studies on it over the span of 13 years, speaks to her credibility as a witness in the area I submitted for her expertise.
I agree. I will allow her to testify as an expert as requested by the plaintiff, and I'll leave it up to, if this were a real case, I just leave it up to the jury to decide what kind of weight to give her testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor. Earlier, you mentioned some of your studies, Dr. Rogers. Can you describe how they were organized?
Yes, I can. I conducted a study with 3 groups: a control group, who was a group that was not exposed to Drufo whatsoever, a group who was occasionally exposed to Drufo, and a group who was on the daily exposed to Drufo.
What did you monitor these groups for?
Various health conditions.
What was the outcome of this study?
There was an increase in health conditions in the 2 groups that were exposed to Drufo.
What was included in these health conditions?
Various different cancers, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Is non-Hodgkin lymphoma possibly caused by genetic factors?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, this is outside of the witness's scope of expertise.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness understands how Drufo works and its effects. As part of its effects, carcinogenicity, which again, this witness has studied on multiple occasions, carcinogenicity is included in those effects.
Reply, Ms. Smith.
Yes, Your Honor. So while Dr. Rogers is of course qualified to speak to the effects of Drufo on the human form, the question was specifically asking of the type of cancer and how that comes into play on a completely blank state unrelated to Drufo itself, which is the purview of a medical doctor and not this expert.
I've lost track of whether I need to give plaintiff a reply. Yes, I do. Any reply from the plaintiff?
I have already replied, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I did. Thank you for reminding me. I will sustain the objection, and you can move on with your next question, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on your previous research experience and your examination of this specific case, what is your expert opinion in regards to Mr. Weirs and his exposure to Drufo?
It is highly medically probable that Mr. Weir's exposure to Drufo, or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, was caused by his exposure to Drufo.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Ms. Smith, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Rogers, you researched independently.
Yes, I did.
And you did not have any backers?
No, I did not.
Did you have any partners?
No.
And was the study peer reviewed?
No, it was not.
Has it been replicated?
No.
So you cannot tell the jury that it is reliable science?
No, I cannot.
You also studied how to mitigate the effects of chemicals and Drufo specifically,
Yes.
and you recommend long sleeves and pants at all times,
Yes, I do.
as well as a mask or respirator.
Yes.
Those are steps that the user, as opposed to the manufacturer, would take, correct?
Yes.
You have never been qualified as an expert in a court of law before today.
No, I have not, but I want to in the future.
Would you want to in cases similar to this one?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties myself. Response to the objection.
Your Honor, I am looking for an economic bias as to, let me rephrase. I am following this line of questions to demonstrate that Dr. Rogers has a reason for a financial bias towards Dakota Weirs, as it will boost her career and her credibility, gaining her more money, especially if she is hired in the future for more cases like this in the same capacity as expert witnesses are in fact paid.
And reply.
Your Honor, the specific question asked whether she would want to testify in the future, which first of all has nothing to do with how she is currently being paid for this case, and second of all has nothing to do with the way her study resulted, which is what we primarily asked her about. The study was carried out before she was hired on as an expert witness. She is just testifying as to what she found.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I'll I'll overrule the objection. I do think that whether she intends on and is actually hoping to testify in the future in similar types of cases can potentially go towards financial bias and credibility. So the objection is overruled. And if you need Ms. Smith to repeat the question, Dr. Rogers, I'm sure she can do that.
Yes, can you repeat that, Ms. Smith?
Of course. And you would hope to testify as an expert witness in court in cases similar to this in the future, correct?
Yes.
And that would be very helpful for your career?
Yes, it would be.
And your career up to this point has largely been focused on finding adverse effects to products, correct?
Yes.
And that is the mode by which you have made a decent amount of money, yes?
Yes, it is.
Just as you are being paid to be here in court today.
Yes, like everyone else is.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any redirect from the plaintiff, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you look at anything aside from health conditions for your study?
Yes. Yes, I did. I looked at the protective coverings and how they affected the dangers of exposure.
And what were the results for this section of your study?
The results for this section were inconclusive, given that the proper time period was not given and the workers were not given the proper protective equipment.
And just to reiterate, what were the results for the main section of the study where you looked at non-Hodgkin lymphoma, specifically Drufo and cancer?
Not like the other part, this part of the study was very conclusive. Drufo seemed to be clearly linked to cancer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. Dr. Rogers, you said that the main part of the study as to whether there was a causal link between Drufo and cancer was conclusive, correct?
Yes, I did.
But the second part of the study about protective gear was inconclusive.
Yes.
And this study was carried out over the same time period with the same groups of people?
Yes, it was.
So half of your study had a conclusion and half did not, despite it being the same study.
Yes, it did.
And yet you still made recommendations for any user to wear long pants and gloves?
Yes, but like you said, it was a recommendation.
Of course. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. May the witness be excused. Seeing no objection, Dr. Rogers, you may step down. Any further evidence from the plaintiffs?
No, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
All right, thank you. We'll move over to the defense. Does the defense have any witnesses or evidence they wish to present?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Smith, are you doing the questioning of Mr. Doncourt? You may proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Doncourt, please state your full name, spelling the last for the record.
Blake Doncourt, Doncourt. Yes, false accusations by Dakota Weirs that we put a known carcinogen in our product.
Objection, Your Honor. What was the question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't hear the question. So Ms. Smith, I'm not sure if you cut out or what happened, but we did not hear the question.
I apologize, Your Honor. I will restate. Mr. Doncourt, do you know why you are in court today?
Yes, false accusations by Dakota Weirs that we put a known carcinogen in our product.
And could you specify who you are referring to with we?
Yes, Lush Incorporated.
And how are you connected to Lush Incorporated?
I am the CEO.
And what specifically is your company being accused of?
Putting a known carcinogen in our product, Lush Fertilizer.
Is there any precedent for this accusation?
There is not.
Has your company, Lush Incorporated, ever received accolades or awards?
It has.
Objection,
We
Your
were
Honor.
given-
Relevance.
Response, Ms. Smith?
Your Honor, this is relevant to the case as we are dealing with the comparative possible negligence of Lush Fertilizer, and a breakdown of what they have been recognized for helps show exactly what the company is known for and how it has acted in the past, and helps demonstrate a precedent for carcinogenic things. And had there been any previous records of this, it surely would have shown up in such accolades and awards. Such things as carcinogens, I mean.
Reply.
Your Honor, their awards have nothing to do with whether or not Drufo causes cancer.
I agree. The objection is sustained.
Well then, Mr. Doncourt, moving right along. As the CEO, did you receive any information about Drufo being carcinogenic before you released the product?
No, never.
And have you received any proof of Drufo being carcinogenic since then?
No.
And where do you receive your information as to your product safety?
Our own research as well as the EPA.
And does your product come with any warnings or labels?
It does.
Your Honor, permission to direct yourself, members of the jury, and co-counsel to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 1 in evidence.
Yes, we'll do so.
Mr. Doncourt, could you please read what this label says under hazards as well as user safety recommendations?
Sure. Keep out of the reach of children, causes eye irritation, avoid contact with the eyes of clothing. As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator and N95 face mask is recommended. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning / maintaining personal protective equipment. Users should wash hands before and after use of this product.
Thank you. And did you receive any recommendations as to how you could make your products safer?
I suppose we could bake it, but due to the insignificant levels of toxicity, it was overkill.
And what is baking?
It would bake the fertilizer.
And do you know the opposing witness, Carson Durst?
I do.
And how do you know Mr. Durst?
He was a former employee at Lush.
And while working for your company, did he sign any contracts relevant to this case?
He did. He signed a non-compete agreement.
Objection, Your Honor, relevant.
A reply?
Yes, Your Honor. I am simply bringing up the relationship between Mr. Doncourt and Mr. Durst, as it has been already shown in Mr. Durst's testimony from his perspective and used to demonstrate how he interacted at Lush and why he made his choices. I am simply providing the other half of that narrative and demonstrating what the rest of Lush saw as he acted in Lush.
Response, Ms. Jensen.
Your Honor, I don't see the relevance of Carson Durst's non-compete agreement to this case. It has nothing to do with the damages that came to Dakota Wheels.
The objection's overruled. Again, I think it could potentially go towards witness credibility, so I'll allow the questioning to proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Doncourt?
Please.
While working for your company, did Mr. Durst sign any contracts relevant to this case?
Yeah, the non-compete agreement.
Did he ever inform you of anything proving Drufo to be carcinogenic while working for you?
No, he did not.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Jensen, any cross-examination of the witness?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Doncourt, you said there was no valid evidence that directly links Drufo to cancer.
Yes, there is no valid evidence.
But there was evidence.
Outside of the witness's scope of knowledge, he is not an expert in the proof. The question was asking if he had the proof. He is not a scientist. He has been informed of things, but he did not directly study the product.
Response, Ms. Jensen.
Your Honor, that was not my question. And I asked if he said that there was no valid evidence that directly links Drufo to cancer, which he would know because he's the CEO and it would have to have been run by him.
And any reply?
Your Honor, while he would of course receive any information regarding his product safety, it does not mean that he has the evidence or the expert opinion to make an opinion based on the evidence.
So we're dealing with a little bit of a semantic problem. I'm going to sustain the objection, but I think that Ms. Jensen's actual question was more if he had received any information, not whether he, investigated it himself. So just a slight rewording of that question, Ms. Jensen.
Well, Mr. Doncourt, there was evidence.
I'm sorry?
There was evidence that Drufo might cause cancer.
Objection, Your Honor, leading question.
That's overruled. She can lead. She's cross-examining.
There was
Thank
no
you.
evidence.
You didn't believe this evidence to be valid,
Yes.
meaning there was evidence.
There was no evidence from our own research, and if you're referring to the one from Dr. Rogers, I don't believe that followed reliable protocols.
I am not. Thank you. There were studies about the risk that Drufo might cause cancer.
There were.
You didn't believe these studies to be valid.
They didn't say that it would cause cancer.
And you didn't believe them to be valid.
Objection, Your Honor, vague question. She is not being clear as to which studies she is referencing. We have multiple studies in this case, those performed by Dr. Rogers and those performed by Lush itself. I would ask that she clarify which studies she is referring to at a given point.
Response, Ms. Jensen.
I am referring to any studies that would show that Truffaut does cause cancer, and that Mr. Durst didn't believe them to be valid. Mr. Doncourt, excuse me.
Reply, Ms. Smith.
It is still vague, as the studies in question had different results, as Dr. Rogers seems to be under the impression that Truffaut causes cancer, whereas the extensive research from Lush Fertilizer said that there was no real issue involved. So to ask as a broad question is vague and incredibly confusing for the witness to have to answer.
I'll sustain the objection. Ms. Jensen, you can rephrase it just with questioning about what specific study you're referring to.
Thank you, Your Honor, but that won't be necessary. Moving on. You called Carson Durst a regrettable disappointment, Mr. Doncourt,
I did.
and you were angry when Carson Durst went to work for your rival.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Mr. Doncourt's relationship with Durst in terms of how he felt as Durst moved to his rival's company does not have relevance to either his reliability when testifying to his company's procedures, nor to the carcinogenic possibilities of Truffaut, or to the related accountability of either party in negligence for this case.
A response, Ms. Jensen.
Your Honor, this goes to show Mr. Doncourt's bias in this case against the plaintiff.
I'm going to sustain the objection, as you're asking about feelings against another witness, not against Dakota Weirs himself. So the objection is sustained.
All right, thank you. You believed Carson Durst to be violating his non-disclosure agreement, Mr. Doncourt?
I did.
And if Terra Greenery would learn your trade secrets, Lush would be hurt financially.
Of course, as would any company.
You said Carson Durst was earning more than any researcher should earn,
I did.
and more than Lush could afford to pay.
Yes.
Moving on. Mr. Doncourt, you are the CEO of Lush Fertilizer.
Objection,
am.
Your Honor. Asked and answered. We have already established Mr. Doncourt as the CEO of Lush Fertilizer. An additional question is unnecessary.
Reply, Ms. Jensen.
Your Honor, I am asking to remind the court, not because it hasn't already been stated.
Any reply, Ms. Smith?
Mr. Doncourt's position as the CEO has been well established and continually recalled throughout the questioning. I do not believe the court in need of a reminder.
So the objection is overruled, asked and answered as if that question was asked by counsel before, not if it was asked by you before. Counsel does get to ask questions their own way, and they are allowed to kind of emphasize certain things. So the objection is overruled. Ms. Jensen, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat that, Mr. Doncourt?
No, it's all right. I am the CEO.
Thank you. You are responsible for your employees as the CEO.
I am.
You said Mr. Durst did not do his job.
I did.
While he was under your supervision.
Yes.
Moving on. You would never intentionally harm other human beings, correct?
No, of course not.
And you knew that baking the fertilizer would remove any risk of its causing cancer.
Yes, though the risk was already so low, there was no need.
But you would never, even negligently, harm other human beings. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that response, Mr. Doncourt.
I said no, I would not.
Thank you. And because it cost too much money, you didn't bake the fertilizer.
Oh, no, we did not bake it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Any redirect, Ms. Smith?
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. Mr. Doncourt, was there any evidence that led you to believe baking Drufo? Sorry, allow me to rephrase. Mr. Doncourt, did you receive any evidence that made you think baking Drufo was a good idea?
No, there was so little risk. I mean, both by federal and state standards, there was no need to even put a warning on the label.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any brief recross based on those questions, Ms. Jensen?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Doncourt, you just said that there was little risk that Drufo could cause cancer,
I did.
but there was a risk.
I suppose a small risk.
And yet you chose not to bake Drufo.
I did.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Jensen. The defense can call their next witness.
The defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand.
All right, thank you. You may begin your questioning.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your first and last name.
I'm Skylar Weirs, Weirs.
Why are you here today?
I'm here to defend the product Lush Fertilizer and the company Lush Incorporated, as they are being unfairly blamed by my brother that they caused his cancer.
Who is your brother?
My brother is Dakota Weirs.
What is your profession?
I'm an investigative journalist for The Rationalist.
What is The Rationalist?
The Rationalist is a quarterly scientific magazine published by the Rationalist Society, which is a nonprofit organization that helps promote scientific skepticism, as well as resisting the spread of pseudoscience and irrational beliefs.
Ms. Weirs, are you motivated by money?
Absolutely not. I mean, I really believe in this case. Lush Incorporated is actually donating 10% of their annual profits to help with nitrogen contamination, and their CEO actually started a charity.
Can we address the background you have for this case?
I might not have a college degree, but I do have extensive research knowledge, specifically in Drufo and in agritech. Now, my expertise, my knowledge base is in general knowledge, as well as historical and statistical information, which doesn't require a college degree.
How long have you been researching Drufo for The Rationalist?
I have been researching for almost a year.
And Ms. Weirs, your opinion has no effect on the conclusions or facts that you may present from your research, correct?
No, I mean, I have to present this information in a way that is comprehensive to the
question.
All right, we have an objection to leading. What's the response from counsel?
Apologies, Your Honor. Allow me to rephrase. So from your research, there is going to be no opinion drawn, correct?
Hold on just one second.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm getting some feedback and I'm having a hard time hearing. Did you respond to the objection?
Repeat that again, Your Honor, sorry.
Sure. Mr. LaRue, did you respond to the objection to leading?
Yes.
I didn't hear it. Could you repeat?
I said, oh, yeah, sorry. I'm stating that it's simply for clarification.
Reply.
Opposing counsel very clearly said the answer that he was looking for in his question and then said correct, as if to suggest that that is the answer to the question.
I'm going to sustain the objection that it clearly was leading, and it went a little beyond just simple background or clarification. So the objection is sustained. And then let me just ask, is Mr. LaRue and the witness, are you guys in the same room?
Yes, I forgot to mute my microphone for a second. Sorry, that's on me.
All right, no worries. Just make sure that you keep that muted because I'm picking you up on that and then also on Mr. LaRue's microphone, and it's makes it hard to follow. So, Mr. LaRue, you may continue.
Sorry about that, Honor. Does your opinion affect your research, Ms. Weirs?
No, it really doesn't. I have to present this information that I gathered to the public in a way that's comprehensive, but I don't put my own opinion into my research.
So after this year's research, you wrote an article, correct? Sorry, that was very vague.
Question. Objection, Your Honor, leading question.
Okay, response, Mr. LaRue.
Apologies, Your Honor. Allow me to rephrase.
Objection sustained. You may rephrase.
Ms. Weirs, after this year's research, you wrote an article.
Yes, I did.
Objection, leading question, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
That's all right. That is a leading question, but I'm going to let you go ahead and move forward. That actually was just kind of innocuous background, so I'll let you continue with that one.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you list the information from your research, Ms. Weirs?
Yes, I basically found out that Drufo is a bonding agent. So it bonds to the grass as well as to lush fertilizer to help prevent that nitrogen runoff that's pretty harmful to the environment. I also found that many pesticides have harmful carcinogens in them. As identified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, arsenic is a carcinogen and glyphosate is a possible carcinogen, both of which are found in pretty much every pesticide, which Drufo eliminates the need of because it works as a pesticide on its own without needing those. So really, it's just protecting its users, if anything.
Did you write this article to research the effects of your sibling?
No, coincidentally, I started this research before my brother was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And does your sibling's condition affect how you may testify?
No, in this case, we're finding that facts are more valid than the sympathies that we all share for my brother. Now, don't get me wrong, I really care about my brother, but I hope that they find justice in a better way, because right now we just have to focus on those facts.
Thank you. What did you find out about the link between Drufo and certain types of cancer in your research?
Studies that linked Drufo and cancer were inconclusive at best. And what was found was that pesticides have a causal link to cancer rather than Drufo.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue. And Ms. Rowe, or I'm sorry, I guess I should refer to you as Ms. Weirs. If you can, I don't know if there's a way that you can check your mic volume because you're a lot louder than everybody else. I don't know if you're blasting everybody else, but it's coming across really loud on my end. So I don't know if there's a way that you can check your mic volume.
I will try to fix that. Sorry.
Or even just sit back away. Just know that your microphone appears to be really sensitive. So you, unlike everybody else, can sit back away from your computer a little bit. All right. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, you're an investigative journalist, yes?
Yes, I am.
You write for The Rationalist,
I do.
a magazine made to promote scientific skepticism.
Yes, it is.
And do you have a college degree?
No, but I don't need one.
You've written about many topics.
Yes, I've written about a great deal of things.
And you'll write about anything?
I mean, I'll write about anything in the name of scientific skepticism.
Thank you. Miss Weirs, in your journalism, you've written about Truffaut.
Yes, I have.
And you don't believe the lush fertilizer is dangerous.
No, I don't.
But you're not a scientist, so you haven't
No.
researched Truffaut yourself.
By the way, I'm having a little bit of
nitrogen is known.
a
Hold
hard
on
time
one-
hearing the attorney.
Yeah, yes, hold on 1 second. So I'll just give you a little bit more feedback, Ms. Weirs, Ms./Rowe. You're doing, it's much better when you sit back, so that's good.
Okay.
And then Ms. Jensen, if you'll actually get closer to your microphone, because you're really quiet.
Can you hear me any better now?
Yes, I could hear that much better. Could you restate your last question?
Thank you. Yes, I can. You said nitrogen is known to contribute to cancer.
Yes, I believe I have.
And nitrogen is one of Truffaut's main ingredients.
Yes.
Now, Truffaut is a chemical fertilizer, yes?
Yes, it is.
And you said there will never be a truly safe chemical fertilizer?
I mean, there's never going to be a truly safe pesticide, so yeah.
And Truffaut is a pesticide.
Yes, but it doesn't work quite the same as most other pesticides.
And in your own words, you said pesticide is poison.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Mr. LaRue, any redirect?
Can you please state that again, Your Honor?
I was just asking if you had any redirect for Ms. Weirs.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, you stated that lush fertilizer is a fertilizer, not a pesticide, correct?
Yes, it's a fertilizer.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I'm guessing the plaintiff doesn't have any redirect based on the single question. Or
I do,
sorry,
actually,
recross.
Your Honor.
You do have a recross?
Yes.
Okay, keep
Ms.
it brief though,
Weirs,
because that was just one question.
I will. Ms. Weirs, you said that Truffaut acts as a pesticide, yes?
Truffaut does act as a pesticide, just a little differently than other pesticides do.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, Ms. Weirs may step down and the defense can call their next witness.
The defense calls Devin Williams to the stand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cameron. You may begin your questioning when you're ready.
Will you please state your full name and spell your last for the record?
I'm Dr. Devin Williams, Williams.
Thank you. And Dr. Williams, why are you here today?
I'm here because Lush Fertilizer has been accused of its products containing Truffaut, causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma in Dakota Weirs.
Would you briefly recount your history with Lush Fertilizer?
Of course. I've been working there for roughly 12 years. I was hired first as a technician on the Truffaut team, and for the last 7 years, I've led the research and development team on Truffaut. I also hold an outgoing chair on the Lush Ethics Committee.
Do you have significant experience with Truffaut?
Yes, I do.
And would you please give a brief explanation of your education?
Most definitely. Undergrad for PhD, I attended Colorado State University down in Fort Collins, and then I completed a specialized post-PhD program at the University of Utah. I studied toxicology at CSU and then pharmacotoxicology at Utah.
Thank you. And what is your work experience?
I worked as an assistant professor in forensic toxicology, and I worked with the chief medical examiner of Larimer County, analyzing toxins. I now have worked at Lush Fertilizer for roughly a decade. As I said, leading the research and development team on Drufo. I also occasionally teach forensic toxicology at CSU and the University of Albuquerque.
Just briefly, so the court can better understand your experience, what is toxicology?
Toxicology is the study of biochemical and biomolecular markers to ascertain whether something will be toxic to life forms, especially humans.
Dr. Williams, do you have a curriculum vitae?
Yes, I do.
Would you recognize a copy if you were directed to it?
Of course.
Your Honor, permission to direct the witness as well as yourself, jury members, and opposing counsel to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 9.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Would you please flip to Exhibit 9, Ms. Williams?
I have.
Thank you. Is this a fair and accurate representation of your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
Does it appear to be altered in any way?
No, it does not.
Your Honor, permission to submit what has previously been marked as Exhibit 9 into evidence?
Any objection from the plaintiff?
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you. Exhibit 9 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you. And Your Honor, I move that Dr. Devin Williams be entered as an expert witness in forensic and pharma toxicology.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Then she shall be so acknowledged.
Tell the jury how Drufo works.
Of course. Drufo is a binding agent that can interrupt the effects of eutrophication. Eutrophication is a nitrate runoff from irrigation water or rainwater, and as those nitrates follow the water to bodies of water, they can cause really dense algae blooms that cause horrible bacteria that can kill fish and can be extremely harmful to humans. Drufo binds the nitrogen that is often included in fertilizers to the plant and to the soil. So then when that water comes through, eutrophication doesn't happen nearly as much. Drufo can help fertilizers be much more environmentally safe.
Thank you. And are you aware of Drufo being banned in any countries?
It's banned in the EU because of nitrogen-based lab tests, but they aren't accurate to what happens in nature. If you add the right bacteria to Drufo products, there will still be nitrogen and therefore nitrates in it, but that's not exactly what happens in nature. Drufo still makes things much more environmentally safe.
And does the ban have anything to do with cancer concerns?
It does not.
And in your expert opinion, is the ban reasonable?
It is not.
Are you aware of any links between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
No legitimate ones.
And are you familiar with the study done by Dr. Casey Rogers in regards to the toxicity of Drufo?
Yes.
In your expert opinion, is this study reliable?
No, it is not reliable. It compared apples to oranges, if you will. It compared fertilizer to every other farm-based chemical product. The test subjects were exposed to too many chemicals for it to be legitimate data. Really, Drufo had no statistical relevance in the concerns, but if people who work on farms are exposed to chemicals, they are exposing themselves to some risk. Drufo doesn't have any correlation to cancer based on this study, and the largest problem with this study is that it hasn't been peer-reviewed nor replicated. They had no partners in the study, and it hasn't been backed. I do not deem it reliable in the slightest.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And in your expert opinion, is there any relevant evidence that you have observed that there is a link between cancer and Drufo?
There is not.
or I'm sorry, cancer and Drufo in humans specifically?
Again.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Permission to proceed?
You have it.
You've worked for Lush for a long time, Dr. Williams.
Roughly 12 years.
In fact, you're a supervisor there.
Yes, I lead the research and development labs on Drufo specifically.
Thank you. So you're very loyal to this company.
And the truth.
I apologize, Dr. Williams. You cut out for me. Can you restate that answer?
Of course. Could you repeat the question?
Of course. I said, so you're very loyal to this company.
I suppose I'm loyal, but I'm more loyal to science and to what is true.
And you have a financial interest here.
But as I previously stated, I'm much more loyal to what is true and the why and how between sciences.
I hate to make you restate again, but I didn't hear the first half of that question. I'll re-ask the question I had. You have a strong financial interest here.
I am employed there, so yes, I suppose. Do I have to repeat the second half of my answer, or did you hear me clearly?
I heard you clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you were brought onto the Drufo development team about halfway through its testing?
Roughly, yeah.
This was when there was a lot of employee turnover?
There was about 50% of the people had moved to different ventures.
So you were brought on as a result of testing timelines being impacted at this point?
That was part of it, I suppose.
Moving on. France is not the only country that has Drufo banned, as mentioned before.
No, it's the whole EU, and the UK, I think, oversees the testing.
And Lush didn't fight that.
It was a company that was just starting out, and it wasn't really the best idea for such a small company, but we are now planning on refuting that and trying to get our products legalized there.
Right, so they thought it would be too costly to fight that decision.
Well, now we have a better standing, but as a company that was only a few years old, it didn't make a lot of economical sense, I suppose, yes.
And as you mentioned, Lush is now making plans to appeal for reconsideration of this decision.
It is.
And Mr. Weir's winning this lawsuit would disrupt those plans.
It wouldn't affect the data, but it would create some more roadblocks in trying to get it approved, yes.
Which means more work for you and your colleagues.
It would have been work we were doing anyway. We analyzed thoroughly.
But the answer is yes there. And Lush Fertilizers products can be manufactured without Drufo.
Yes, we make other lines without Drufo.
But Lush has only made the adjustment of not adding Drufo to its products in the EU.
Yes, because we can't use the Drufo products there, we have to market the other ones.
And you cannot say with 100% confidence that Drufo does not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
My research labs are currently completing a study on it.
That doesn't answer my question, Dr. Williams. You cannot say with 100% confidence.
Not 100%, no.
But you continue to add this chemical to your products?
Yes, it does not have any statistical significance that is high enough to barter us taking it out completely.
Your Honor, no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, as an expert in pharmacotoxicology, would you be aware, rather, of any health benefits posed to humans with chemicals?
I would.
So you would be able to tell, or would you be able to tell, if there was a carcinogenic link between Lush Fertilizer or rather Drufo. If there was a, excuse me, that was a poorly worded question. You would be able to tell if Drufo was carcinogenic.
The studies would show this, yes.
And statistically speaking, there's not a significant link.
Objection,
No.
Your Honor, leading question.
Response?
My apologies, Your Honor. That was a leading question. Allow me to rephrase.
Sure, I'll sustain the objection and you can rephrase it.
Have you seen any statistically significant link between cancer and Drufo that would lead you to take further safety precautions?
I have not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Any recross?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Williams may step down. Any further evidence from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Are the parties prepared to proceed to closing statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so I have Ms. Smith for the defense and Ms. Jensen for the plaintiff. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Jensen, you may proceed when you're ready. And do you wish me to give you any kind of a warning, like a verbal warning from me, or can you see your timekeepers just fine?
I can see my timekeepers. Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. You may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Lush Fertilizer ruined Dakota Weir's life because Lush was negligent, because Lush does not care. Lush Fertilizer fails to carry out their required duty to their customers to keep them safe from any harm that their fertilizer might cause. Remember, jury instruction 2 states that since we have proven that Drufo is contained in Lush Fertilizer, since we have proven that that the defendant was negligent, since we have proven that Dakota Weir should reasonably be expected to use the product Drufo, and since we have proven that Dakota Weir's cancer was caused by the product Drufo, your verdict must, jury members, be for Dakota Weir's. Number 1, we have proven that Drufo is contained in Lush Fertilizer. Not only have we shown you physical evidence, but you have heard the sworn testimony of many, including the CEO of Lush Fertilizer itself, tell you that it does. Number 2, we have proven that the defendant was negligent and failed to exercise reasonable care to protect its users from unreasonable risk. There was no warning about Drufo on Lush Fertilizer, no warning that Drufo was banned in other countries for its risks to users. Dakota Weir's is not the only person to have gotten sick from using Lush Fertilizer. No. Dr. Casey Rogers informed us that when studied, those exposed to Drufo are 10 times more likely to develop cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, than those who have never been exposed to it before. This is no one-time accident. Many have been affected adversely by Lush Fertilizer. In fact, in Lush's studies, employees found that not only may Drufo contain a known carcinogen, but one linked specifically to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and yet Lush decided it wasn't a problem because Lush does not care. Lush knew there was a reasonable chance Drufo causes cancer and failed to take reasonable action to protect their users from it. They did not bake the fertilizer, which would have removed any possibility that it was carcinogenic, because they did not want to take the time or spend the money to research a moment more to keep their customers safe. Even the defendant's witnesses admit that Drufo is dangerous. Skylar Weirs informed us that Drufo is a pesticide, and what were her words? Pesticide is, by definition, poison. She told us that the main ingredient in Lush Fertilizer is nitrogen, which is known to contribute various types of cancer, and yet Lush Fertilizer did not think to put a simple warning on their packaging. The defendants, in their opening, begged you to take fact over misfortune. So take fact over misfortune. The fact is that Lush was negligent. Number 3, we have proven that Dakota Weirs should reasonably be expected to use Lush Fertilizer, working every day at a landscaping job, spreading fertilizer. Number 4, we have proven that Lush Fertilizer caused Dakota Weir's cancer. There were other workers at Dakota's landscaping job, And yet, Mr. Weirs, using Lush fertilizer, developed cancer. Other than work, Dakota Weirs and his twin lived in the same environment, and yet Dakota Weirs, using Lush fertilizer, developed cancer. If there had been but a single warning on Truffaut's packaging about the danger Truffaut caused, Dakota Weirs could have avoided all of this, and yet Mr. Weirs, using Lush fertilizer, developed cancer. Lush fertilizer knew full well that their product posed a danger to users, and yet Mr. Weirs, using Lush fertilizer, developed cancer. Lush claimed that the risk a known carcinogen would pose was low. They never said there was no risk, and they never said there was no carcinogen. All they could say was that their studies were inconclusive. But that's not exactly true. They rushed their studies so that they would not get bad results. Weirs developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma because of Lush fertilizer that will not allow him to live his life. He can no longer volunteer at the homeless shelter, no longer even play piano, something so simple and so fundamental to his life. Instead, Dakota Weirs suffers at home instead of going to Juilliard in pain and no longer able to sit for long periods of time without bruising and experiencing fatigue and shortness of breath. They ruined his life and took away all prospects of Dakota's Weir, making life as it was impossible. Lush was negligent, and because of that, jury members, your verdict must be for Dakota Weirs.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. We'll now have closing argument from Ms. Smith, and I'll ask Ms. Smith the same question. Can you see your timekeeper all right, or do you need a verbal warning from me?
I can see my timekeeper. Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. Proceed when you're ready.
Members of the jury, Your Honor, opposing counsel, today we are presented with a tragic case of misinformation. Dakota Weirs is going through a terribly difficult and painful event. But as jurors in this case, you and the judge must decide the verdict based on evidence and science, not the influence of sympathy. The plaintiff bears the burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning they must prove that it is more likely than not that Lush was negligent and therefore liable. Furthermore, they must prove, even if by some miracle Lush is found negligent, that it was more negligent than Dakota Weirs himself, who knowingly ignored multiple warnings and precautions. The plaintiff has claimed to have proved the 4 necessary stipulations contained within jury instruction 2. However, the only one they have proved is the first, which we freely admit to. Truffaut is contained within Lush fertilizer, as it has, as was testified by Dr. Williams herself, incredible economic benefits. As for the second stipulation, the defendant was not negligent, as was testified to by Dr. Williams and Mr. Doncourt. Lush fertilizer took every precaution and extensively studied Truffaut and its fertilizer before putting the product on the market to make sure it was as safe as possible for its users. Thirdly, the plaintiff was not one of the persons that could be reasonably expected to have used Lush fertilizer. They were a minor using a product that was labeled for adults only. Furthermore, they used it in an unreasonable manner by actively and knowingly deciding to ignore all safety precautions and recommendations. For the fourth stipulation, the defendant has in no way caused the plaintiff's misfortune. There is no scientific causal link or proof thereof of Truffaut causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma or cancer in general. It has been testified of this by Dr. Williams, who is in charge of the research and development projects at Lush Fertilizer, and by the extensive research found with Miss Weirs, Miss Skylar Weirs, and of course by Blake Doncourt, who testified that as the CEO of his company, he has learned absolutely nothing that could possibly prove Truffaut to be carcinogenic. The plaintiff has attempted to sway your judgment with the testimonies of Dakota Weirs, who drew their conclusions based on Google and has freely admitted to ignoring safety regulations. They also attempted to give you information via the testimony of Carson Durst, a failed Lush employee who currently works for a rival after having broken a confidentiality agreement with their previous employer, Lush Fertilizer. And finally, they ask you to believe the single, non-reliable, non-peer-reviewed, non-replicated experiment of Dr. Casey Rogers, whose expertise lies in the effects of pesticides and fertilizers on plants and insects far more than it does on any human. As you can see, we must listen to the urgings of science. We are all sympathetic to Dakota Weir's plight. However, we cannot allow this sympathy to usurp the science that we have been shown today in court. The scientific research on the subject tells us there is no reliable link between Lush Fertilizer's product and Mr. Weir's condition. The plaintiff bears the burden of proof, and they have attempted to prove such. However, the facts speak for themselves, and there is no proof of Drufo being carcinogenic and no burdens met accordingly. Furthermore, Dakota is far more at fault for his condition than Lush could be. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Oh, I'm unmuted. All right. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Timekeepers, is there any time left for any rebuttal close from the plaintiff?
Yes, they still have 11 seconds.
All right, Ms. Jensen, do you wish to make use of that 11 seconds?
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed when you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lush was negligent, so take science and take facts over misfortune and find Lush liable.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Jensen. That concludes this round. Good work to everybody. I don't know how I haven't had a chance to look at the score sheets. I believe they're online. When we're in person, I usually go ahead and start with the critiques just to give the scorekeepers time to go through their scorecards and tally things up. Frankly, I don't know if it's automated now, but I'm still going to start just in case you need some time to go through the scorecard. And then also don't forget that you'll want to add to the scorecard who you think the best witness was and the best attorney. This is actually my first time doing this virtually. I've done it many times before COVID, where everybody is in person. Last year, I wasn't able to participate. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to do that. And I've just been really impressed with how you guys have been able to cope with using this platform. It's not easy, but you guys seem to be doing really well. And I judged a team yesterday where there were a whole lot of it was the first round, and there were a whole lot of technical problems. And I imagine that in your first few rounds, you may have had a few more technical problems as well. But you all seem to have taken it in stride and figured it out, because this went so much more smoothly than even just the one yesterday. I'm really impressed with all you guys. You have this material down really well. Your presentation's really good. So I'll just give you some little, and this is getting kind of nitpicky because frankly, you guys are doing a good job. If you move forward, and if you have to do this in the future on a remote platform, just keep in mind that when you're in person, that eye contact is really important, right? And that's so easy to do when you're in person because they're in front of you and you know where to look. I do over the past couple of years, we've done more and more virtual proceedings, and I get used to looking at myself, my little window down there, and I'll sit there and look at myself. I don't know if it's just me or if everybody does that. And I'm not always just looking at myself, but I look down instead of at the camera. And as you can see, when I'm looking at the camera, it looks like I'm really talking to you. But when I look down and look at myself, you can tell I'm looking elsewhere and there's not quite the same connection. So keep that in mind moving forward, that if you really want to have that connection and you really want to have that, that extra oomph, look right into that camera, because that is your audience's eyes. So don't lose sight of that. Mr. LaRue, first of all, you all are doing a fine job. So there's a couple of small things that I've picked out just to work on that are small things. There was a point during your questioning where you were covering your mouth. And a lot of times people do this, and it's hard to hear me when I cover my mouth. And it was hard for me to hear you when you covered your mouth. So be careful about those little tics that we all have. Just be careful about them, because some of them aren't that big a deal, but when they get distracting, that's something that you want to work on not doing, or if it affects your communication. And it's funny that the reason I notice that is because I do that all the time, and it drives my wife crazy. I constantly talk with my hand over my mouth, and I have to think about it all the time. Because she can't hear me when I do it, and she's constantly getting after me. So, it takes one to know one, I guess. So work on that. Mr. Cameron, you did a fine job. There was one point, and I don't know if you were it was a little later in, and I don't know if you're just kind of feeling like numb from the waist down like I am, but you started doing this. And this is another thing that can be, one, it's distracting for your audience, and two, it causes you to be quiet and then to be loud and then to be quiet and then to be loud. You only did it for a little bit. But again, I told you I was going to be nitpicky because you guys are doing a good job. So these are just little things to work on. Ms. Smith, you did a really good job questioning the Dr. Rogers' expertise. And shoot, I write these things down and then I kind of forget exactly what my point was. I sustained an objection. But really, it's not always about whether you win the objection or not. It's about whether your point was made. And when you were questioning Dr. Rogers' expertise, you heard me say, in a real case, I would tell the jury, it's up to you to decide what kind of weight to give. So the fact that you had your objection overruled, or I can't remember which way, you lost the objection. I can't remember if it was your objection or what it was, but you had made the point that of drawing telling the jury to look at that expertise and drawing their attention to some potential problems. So you did a good job with that. Everybody that I've seen so far has had the witness reading labels. And when I have somebody do that in my courtroom in a real case, I stop them because, and I should say, I only stop them when I'm the fact finder. When it's in front of a jury, I won't. But unless there's an objection, and there usually is an objection. But if it's a court trial and I'm the fact finder, I stop them because the exhibit speaks for itself. I can read an exhibit. I don't want somebody to read it. And when you get into every witness reading it each time, it really eats into your time that you could use some other way. So keep that in mind, because really what you can have them read it to themselves and then ask a question like, it doesn't say anywhere in there that it causes cancer, does it? If you're on cross. So that to me is more impactful than having them read the entire thing. But everybody's doing it. So I'm not sure why, but in the real world, you're probably going to draw an objection and I'm going to sustain it because I don't want to have the whole thing read to me. And then, oh shoot, I forget. I think it was one of the Jensens who was cross-examining Dancourt. It was it Juliet who did Dancourt?
No, it was Danielle.
Danielle, all right. You did a good job getting him to admit. I mean, at the very end, you're like, you say there's a small risk. So you admit there's a risk. And he's just like, yeah, there's a risk. Drop the mic right there. You're done. Right? That's what you wanted to get across. That was really well done. And it doesn't need you to go on with another question. Just be like, boom, thank you, and be done. But good work there.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Smith, let's see. I have two Ms. Smiths. Delia Smith, who was Dr. Williams. Good job with being a good witness. I mean, there's that technical stuff, man, and maybe you're just a good actress and you're just making things up, but you did a good job of selling it. And you also, with that kind of stuff, I would think it would be really hard not to constantly be tempted to look at something. So you seem to have that down really well. And I just wanted to give you a little shout out because I thought you did a good job. And Juliet, nice use of righteous indignation in your close. That was good. And you do a really good job with inflection. So good work. Good work to everybody. I know I didn't get a chance to mention everybody, but you all impressed me. I'm going to leave it to the scorers to give you a little bit more feedback and accolades. So I'll start with Ms. Jordan. Do you have any feedback for these kids?
Thank you. I sure do. And I'll try to look at the camera. That's a really good tip. I thought I was incredibly impressed. And that's always true. I continue to sign up for this because I learned so much from you. About courtroom etiquette, about evidence, about everything. So really good job on that. You guys are doing lawyer level work and virtually so incredibly well. Feels a little bit like I'm at work. And that's really awesome. That means that you guys you're attorneys. I thought the openings and the closings were incredibly strong. Juliet, your closing got me good. But they were all really, really strong. You laid the roadmap for your cases really well, and you summed them up really well, and you kept our focus on what was important and what we needed to focus on. The cross-examination I was really impressed with, just across the board. Lucy Smith and Danielle Jensen, you two went toe-to-toe a little bit, and that kind of perked me up. And that was pretty cool. It was nice watching you guys go back and forth that way. I have so many things to say about everybody. I mean, the witnesses were incredible. Really, really good job. Amazing acting. So overall, I was just very impressed.
All right, thank you. And we'll go on to Ms. Stewart. Do I have Ms. Stewart still? Or do I not have Ms. Stewart to begin with?
I think I took her place.
Oh, okay. Well, then why don't you go?
All right, that works. Well, I also want to congratulate you guys. It is very tough in a virtual world to be present and still be present while you're looking at, the screens and having so much going on around you guys. Because I'm sure your rooms have everybody moving around, people probably making faces. For the most part, you guys did a really good job of sticking with, with where you're going with the case and what you guys were, where you guys were getting us to pay attention to. I did see a couple times, that there was people in the background or, it looked like a witness or would be talking to somebody, but you guys very much, try to get things figured out and got it going, especially with some of the technical glitches going on. So I very much appreciate it. And, the judge said a lot of what I wrote down that I wanted to talk about. So apparently, those things were being tracked and looked at. So you very much want to pay attention to kind of how your appearances when we're watching you. I know it's virtual. It would be a little bit different if we were all in person. But again, the rocking distracts. Definitely, talking and, being able to present yourself. Juliet, I watched you and you started off kind of meek and quiet, and then you were boom and just wanted to get heard. And so I did enjoy that, you know, you stepped into your confidence. I know it's a little bit like kind of sketchy doing that. And then Delia, I also watched your confidence as well. And, you know, we expect as an expert for them to be confident in what they're talking about. And you completely did that. Casey, you as well, you know, you guys were able to have that cockiness in there. It was actually kind of funny because when Juliet was doing her closing, one of the things she said about Dakota was like, you know, he couldn't sit, he couldn't, you know, stay still for a little while. So I was kind of trying to go back to Dakota's testimony. It's like, did he look like he couldn't sit? And then it was one of those, like, I kind of now wanted to see like acting in that part of like, okay, you're uncomfortable sitting there for a while. Like this stuff is actually bothering you. But I didn't actually realize it until the end. So I wouldn't have known either way because I didn't look for it. Some of the other things, for Harrison, when you were giving your, when you were doing your, I'm trying to think who was, you're going against, I think you were going against Delia, right? And so when she wouldn't answer your questions, you know, you very much got on her that, hey, you didn't answer my question for me. So it is nice to know that the attorneys, yes, you guys have objections because you have, you know, co-counsel helping you or saying objection, but, you know, really actually paying attention and focusing in on that. You did a great job with that. And I know, Ethan, you guys, when you guys were doing yours as well, you know, you guys were getting help from one another. And that's actually a good thing. Like, so we were able to be able to kind of see you guys work together to, you know, answer all those questions and things like that. But I also agree, don't cover your mouth because you have so much to say. And so, but I did notice that for a team called Bluegrass, you all wore red. So other than that, like, you guys did a really great job and I enjoyed it. And I watched mock trials probably for over 10 years. And I really enjoyed watching you guys and, you know, hearing everybody's quirkiness and comebacks and things like that to be able to stay in the case. So thank you very much.
Our school colors are red is one of them. So we color code as a team red and black to try and be more homogenous as a unit.
I noticed that, and I love the bow tie for the record. Like most people can't pull off a bow tie, but you did it just fine.
All right, good work, everybody. Do I have Tammy Stillwell or any other judge or juror that wants? There we are. You want to give some feedback?
Just wanted to say that this is the first year that I volunteered to do this. I work in a law firm. And I would be very proud to have any of those lawyers, my lawyer. Not that I'll probably ever have a problem, but I was very, very impressed. I liked it. I've been a part of the attorney's office for 20 some years. And and I've been to many courts and many courtrooms. And it was just very interesting and I loved it. And you guys were great. I remember back when I was young, I could not sit in front of a camera or in front of people and do that. So you guys are really awesome and I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I will do it again before I retire. So thank you very much.
All right, good work, everybody. And Sophie Harrison, just in case you thought I forgot about you, you did a standout job as well. I mean, you guys are all just you know, I see a lot of attorneys in front of me and I'm always impressed with the high school kids that come and do this every year that you could easily come and present in front of me and I probably wouldn't notice a difference. So good work, all of you. I think I saw Sunita on here earlier.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I mean, really, really great job. We are going first. I guess I want to say scorers, please be sure to submit, hit the submit button for your score sheets. So we have those. We will be meeting in courtroom 1, so you can stay here. This is where we will do the award ceremony. And right now there is still one round that's still going. So it may be a few minutes, but I would think in about 10 minutes, hopefully we'll be able to announce the winners. We will have awards for first place, second place, and third place. The top two teams, first and second place, will be going on to the state championship. And we will also be presenting awards for best attorney, best witness, and professionalism. So thank you again, everybody, for participating, and scores as well. If you want to stay on for the award ceremony, please feel free to do so. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Make it. You mute.
Mr. Harris. Do they pay reports that they are ready for inspection on the community?
I looked at it, it's good.
Okay, excellent job.
Thank you, Felipe.
I told them, everybody else, they need to like come, bring their stuff and then go right back and I'll help them until they're done.
Yes.
Okay? Good. Hired.
It wasn't Dakota's fault. Hold on. So we go to